Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I
Yeah,
audible?
I can hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Just want to make sure.
sure, I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Same thing.
Welcome to the final session of the day. We have an esteemed panel for generative AI. The live panel is a perfect amalgamation of industry and academia. Introducing our panelists first, we have Dr. Vinesh Kumar. Dr. Vinesh currently serves as a Senior Director, Head of AI/ML Product Management at Qualcomm Technologies. In this role, he leads AI/ML product definition, strategy, and translating vision statement into solution deployment across multiple business units. He has about 20 years of industry experience spread across research, architecture, engineering, and application deployment. He currently holds a doctorate degree specializing in imaging and vision systems, while also completing a business degree focused on strategy and marketing.
We also have Kamal Kumar Rathanasamy. Kamal is a distinguished technologist and head of generative AI research at Infosys. He is a machine learning strategist, designing and executing emerging ML-based solutions to solve multiple business use cases for the myriad of clients.
From Linux Foundation, we have Dr. Ibrahim Haddad. Dr. Ibrahim is Vice President of Strategic Programs at the Linux Foundation, where he collaborates with the largest technology companies and open source projects. He is focused on facilitating a vendor-neutral environment for advancing the open source AI platform.
From the academia side, we have Dr. Pushpak Bhattacharya. Dr. Pushpak is the Bhagat Singh Rekhi Chair Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Bombay. He has done extensive research in NLP and ML. He has published close to 400 research papers, authored and co-authored 6 books, and guided more than 350 students for their PhD, master's, as well as undergraduate thesis.
Finally, we have Tarun Page. Tarun is a joint PhD student at IIT Bombay and Monash University, working with deep learning techniques for combinatorial optimization problems. Previously, he was associated with the Sound of AI, which aims to create a piece of collaborative research in AI music. The moderator for the evening is Praveen Kumar GS. Praveen has 20 plus years of experience in developing products for various domains like multimedia, DRM, and voice technologies. His areas of specialization varies from research to productization. In SRIB, he is currently leading AI Center of Excellence and also he is heading Voice Service Group. Now, I'll hand over the stage to Praveen.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. And I welcome all the panelist members. Thanks for taking your time and participating in SOSCON India. Just to set the context, to start with, when ChatGPT took over the world by a storm in this December, right? Is it a one-day job, or is it a continuous effort? So our view is it evolved over the time from several years, and especially because of this open source, it has benefited a lot. Majorly, there are 4 sectors where ChatGPT is able to evaluate, bring up, right? So because of the 4 sectors, one is on the technology aspects. Okay, so in 2017, there was this transformers which was introduced. It has benefited even the traditional AI, and also it is one of the backbone for generative AI. That was one of the key open source. Then there were second sector is on the tools. The tools can be data annotation tools, or it can be based on the server related technologies or deployment tools, etc. This is one more aspect. Then the third sector is about data. Right? There is a lot of data which got open source. With that, the training became easier. Right? So because the data pipelines are established and using the world to access. Then the fourth is about the infrastructure, the availability of GPU. But most importantly, for training these LLMs, you need a good training pipeline. So in the training pipeline, also there were a lot of like the lot of algorithms was done. Because if you want to keep your LLM out, you need to train the models quickly and also do the deployment. So there were a lot of fine-tuning techniques which are open source, etc. And in the inference pipeline also, there are a lot of open sources which we can use. So majorly these 4 techniques helped in ChatGPT to take over the world. Having said that, when the generative is at our hand, it can be primarily used for 2 purposes. One is the productivity. Productivity meaning you are doing some coding and you want to access and take help from generative AI to fill the code. Or you're writing an email and in between tone correction or grammatical correction or can be in crisp form, it can explain, etc. These are where you are submitting some input and expecting AI to help. This is productivity. Then there is a second sector which is totally creativity. They're asking tell a joke for 8-year-old kid, or you're asking for a code generation with some array of buffers or through a pointers, or you're asking it should run on the device. What is the optimization applied? So it is a completely creative field. So with this, again, it can generate a lot of new data and a lot of new code and a lot of other things also. The biggest question is the newly generated code or the newly generated data, can we loop it back and submit to open source? This is a debating point which needs to be thought through. That's one thing. So today what we are going to discuss is mainly from, we have a really diversified panel, both from industry and academia. So whatever happened to evolve the generative AI through open source is done. Now how generative AI will help the open source back, right? So that's the panel discussion about. So to start and ignite our conversations, very quickly we can talk about how generative AI is in your own fields, right? Be it business operations or creating a new experience for consumer products, or in your academic research, how we are able to use it and leverage the generative AI. We will start with Dr. Pushpak first, then we will move ahead with other panel members. Dr. Pushpak, over to you. You are on mute, Dr. Pushpak.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening to you, Praveen, and thanks to you, thanks to Samsung to bring all of us together on this platform to discuss a very, very live and burning point. namely generative AI. And as you have already underlined, the theme is open source and the role of generative AI in this open source environment. Of course, if we look at the history of generative AI, we do see that everything started with language modeling, an extremely simple question. So I'm a professor, a teacher, so foundations and fundamentals are very important for me. So a very simple question, namely given n words, can you predict the n plus 1th word? That's all. Okay, so that's how this whole business started, and this is called language modeling question. Now, language modeling is totally dependent on the data and maximum likelihood estimate. So this very simple ability, when given to a neural network model, that model can be used for other tasks. So the favorite analogy which I use in my classes and also in research discussions is that if we have a good athlete who has built his strength, stamina, agility, this person can play anything, can play football, can do swimming, can play badminton, and so on. So a neural network which has been trained to accurately predict the next word can be fine-tuned to do sentiment analysis, question answering, summarization, and so on and so forth. Now, this pretty old question of language modeling took on a new life of its own when the data became much, much larger and from very diverse areas, from commerce, from education, from agriculture, name it. And all this data is fed into parameter setting for a neural network. So this diversity and the volume of data has taken the language modeling question to a completely different level. And we have models which are extremely powerful to undertake any language processing task. Now in academia, this has come as a boom because for all these tasks, we now have a benchmark. I can create a summarization system and compare this against ChatGPT or BARD and see where I stand. Just today morning, I was discussing with a student of mine who is working on visual metaphor. So suppose you have the picture of a pen which looks like a sword and the pen is writing on a piece of paper. So it's a visual metaphor. It says that the writing is so powerful and so scathing, against the ills of the society that it cuts across and makes a powerful impact. So it's a visual metaphor. It's a beautiful way of expressing this powerful thought. We gave this picture to BARD and asked if it sees a metaphor in that picture. It came back with a different interpretation, but said that yes, there is metaphor in it. So first benefit to us is a benchmark which generative AI has produced for any NLP task whatsoever. Machine translation, question answering, summarization, anything. The other development we see in society, we are not devoid of our linkage with society, is that extremely innovative applications are coming into picture. Today morning, there was a report in Times of India that in electioneering in UK, one of the candidates is using generative AI in a very innovative way. He is giving all the sentiments expressed on social media by people of its locality, of his constituency, understanding the sentiment, and then the generative AI is automatically producing an election manifesto, which is sensitive to people's sentiments around the person. So these kind of applications are coming, and they're very, very innovative. So these are great developments which are happening in the world. And as Praveen said, generative AI is also generating data. So modulo the question of plagiarism and so on, it can definitely contribute to all these open endeavor, both for source code as well as data. Thank you.
Thank you. It remembers a cartoon I saw long back, where on the left side there was this one person who was feeding to chickens. and there were a lot of his friends. On the right side, later, after some time, the same picture was depicted where he was lying on the bed, right? And the pigeons are seeing him from the window. Right? So I used to wonder, right, human, we are able to connect, right? So since he paid back to that pigeons with food, they even remembered and visited while he was in a hospital. I used to think whether AI can really understand this much level depth. Now with the generative AI and understanding of the reasoning abilities, I can see that we are going to see that very, very soon. The singularity, what we were talking, right, was 2045. Initially, now it was downgraded to 2028. The AI will surpass human. With that, I'll invite Dr. Vinesh to share his insights on his side.
Hi, Praveen. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So just want to make sure I'm coming through. So thanks, Praveen, for having me and the audience. For a minute, I lost you. Can you just repeat your question, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So the question was on how generative AI you are using in your own experience or for the business operation or to advance your research, whatever the field you're working. So it's about that we are discussing now.
Oh, perfect. So generative AI is a brand new entity and a level of expertise that many consumers have actually taken it by storm. So when you look at enterprise vendors, basically like companies like Qualcomm as such, right? You're trying to make sure how generative AI can actually touch the consumer base through the products or experiences that we can actually create. This could be either through content creation or through productivity tasks. The content creation, as an example, is especially when you happen to have images, and this is quite popular in in many spaces wherein people want to actually morph their photographs to look good, as an example, right? And this could be done offline. This could be done online. What I mean by saying offline is if you happen to have a bunch of images in your gallery, the expectation is using generative AI. Can you clean up the images? Now, you could have maybe, for good or bad reason, beautify your skin or beautify your face or change the coloring of the dresses that you wear, kind of stuff. All of this could be done offline using generative AI. Or there could be elements wherein you want to do it online. That is, if you're actually taking a video stream and you want to change your background in this case. So using a textual input as a comment, you could change your background instantaneously, as an example. Again, most of this is touching the consumers, either be streaming applications, face-to-face applications, kind of things. The relevance, we're also getting into productivity as an anchor point. And productivity is a serious area where generative AI is taking a lot of interest, and this could come in terms of large language models. This could be perceived as construction of an email, composition of an email, or summarizing an email, or summarizing a document, or summarizing a document with the context. So which means this physical structure itself can apply in many subcategories. For example, in legal matters, especially when you happen to have tons and tons of legal documents, you want to make sure that you happen to have a reference, what that really means. So generative AI in enterprise markets, especially dealing with legal matters, can give you references from previous documents for summarizing what exactly was a judgment call, as an example. You're also seeing in health industry, wherein, for good or bad reason, when people want to really understand, is my health insurance actually covering up a certain issue a person might have? And if the health insurance is, 200, 300 pages long, it's almost impossible to read through fine detail. So you happen to have these interesting chatbots that's actually been created in consumer devices that have access to your manuals, and you ask a question, it gives you precise answers to that specific manual, as an example. Same thing if you extend this into automotive environment, which is actually coming up and becoming quite popular, is in an infotainment dashboard, wherein the dashboard is now becoming an intelligent assistant And if you happen to have a car that's breakdown, and you happen to have all kind of lights blinking inside, and you have no idea what those lights blinking are, then you have to open up a manual and then go through the shape and the color and the frequency of the blink to really understand what is the problem, right? So instead, you can actually ask your dashboard, can you explain the problem statement? So it immediately understands the context. It understands exactly the history of the problem statement, or rather it has environmental awareness and gives you a response. So these kind of things is really, really morphing in many ways, in many shapes. I totally expect you're going to see consumer penetration to be much higher Q4 of this year / first half of next year is when, coming up in mobile phones or personal devices like your laptops, or even, elements like automotive devices. Now, obviously, given its penetration, given its attraction, and given its attention to consumers, it's also important that we put some sanity checks around it. Like there's elements like hallucinations. How do you prevent it? Elements like how do you remove bias, those kind of stuff. So it's still early phases, but a lot of research happening in this area. And I'm hoping in the next 6 to 9 months, you're going to see a lot more interesting findings coming out of it.
Thank you, Dr. Dinesh. I can see that the last two examples you gave on health insurance and automobiles. To understand something, people need to refer some manuals and go through it. But whereas this new experiences can be created directly by generative AI, where the interactive talk can happen to understand and deal with the problem. So that is really, really great. We hope we will ship it to the end consumers soon, that kind of new experiences. So with that, I'll hand over to Kamal to share his insights on this.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So I focus on augmenting the coding tasks by adopting these large language models. So if you look at any enterprise grade code file, right, majority of the words in a program file will be your custom identifiers, the name of your variables, your custom classes, methods, namespaces, projects, and so on. There'll be only few words which will be your standard keywords from that programming language, right? Now, if you adopt a pre-trained model, which is probably the state-of-the-art model for that specific programming language, if you adopt a pre-trained language model, it probably can generate all the standard keywords, and it can probably hallucinate the new variable names, but the project-specific custom identifiers are not part of its vocabulary. It's out of scope for them. And hence what we do is we build custom language models where we fine-tune a pre-trained model with project code base so that it can generate project-specific recommendations. Now, having said that, since this whole theme is about how open source community is actually fueling this generative AI space, right? I would like to highlight on two key contributions from the open source community for generative AI. Number one, these custom language models, we were able to build it because it was all built on top of foundation models, the pre-trained models. The open source community has built a range of foundation models, the language models for different domains, for finance, for science, and so on, and for different models, the multi-models, right? For different models, for text, for code, for image, for vision, and within text for a variety of natural languages, and within code for a variety of programming languages, and for a variety of coding tasks and natural language tasks, right? So this open source community has built this variety of foundation models that we can use it as a base for building custom language models, and they've built it for varied sizes. You have models from 350 million parameters till billions and trillions today, right? So because of this, we were able to build the custom language models. The second key contribution is that we have the second key contribution is that a context window. This is a very important here because the open source community has always been, it's playing a catch-up game with the closed source models in terms of context window. The context window is probably the space, the number of parameters, the tokens that will contain the input and the output of an API, right? So when open source models were supporting 2048 context window size, the OpenAI models were supporting 4096. And when open source models reached a point where they can support 4096 context window, OpenAI started supporting 32,000. It's always been a catch-up game. But in the last 3 months, the open source community, through this Alibi algorithm and all, right? So they did a breakthrough, and now the open source models support context window in range of 65,000, 100K, 350K, and 500K, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your insight, Kamal. Now we'll move to Tarun. Completely on the research, what's your take?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. So in my previous work at the Sound of AI Open Source Research, we were tasked to create a user interface for musicians to generate guitar sound based on voice or text description. So our system analyzed the vocal instruction and then extract the timbral descriptors from those commands, and then use those descriptions to condition the latent space of our neural net generator. So it was an open source collaborative project, and I was fortunate to be part of that. And I worked as a research co-coordinator for speech to test group in that project. And currently, I'm a PhD student at IIT Bombay, and I'm looking forward to apply like generative AI techniques in my research.
Okay, thank you, Tarun. Now moving on to Dr. Push. Very interesting. What are the researches happening in IIT Bombay for Gen? Followed by how it will be contributing back to our digital India movement or India Stack contributions.
Yes, thank you again, Praveen, for asking that question. So IIT Bombay has had a very long tradition of cutting edge and in-depth research in AI, machine learning, NLP. I myself have been in NLP for about 2.5 decades now, and I've seen all generations of NLP, all the 3 generations: rule-based NLP, statistical NLP, and now deep learning-based NLP. We have strong speech group, research, vision group, robotics group, etc. in IIT Bombay. Now, coming to some specific problems, machine translation has been an extremely strong area of IIT Bombay, and naturally so, because India is a multilingual country, and whenever Government of India had any kind of effort in machine translation, our NLP group was always one of the first choices. So here, in machine translation, we transitioned from rule-based to statistical in around 2012, 2013, and from that to deep learning-based systems around 2018-19. So here, we made use of large language models. What used to be called very large at the time are now small. I'm talking about XLM, BERT, and so on. And we are surely making a lot of usage of Llama, then Palm, GPT 3.5, and so on, whatever is available with some small amount of payment or open source. We have been investigating a lot in summarization, question answering, and sentiment analysis. With Samsung, we have conducted research before and also ongoing research in information extraction, question answering, these areas. My colleagues in IIT Bombay are very active in multimodal generative AI, then of course speech, computer vision, image processing, and so on. Now, all this work are feeding into many large activities of Government of India. So you probably have seen reports on this large-scale machine translation project called Bhashini, which aims to translate from all Indian languages to all other Indian languages where the input is spoken. And the application is in education, in judicial domain, in agriculture, and so on. And it is our mandate from Government of India to enable such applications. And these are extremely useful for impacting life in society, because when rural India, then tier 2, tier 3 cities are benefiting a lot from these multilingual endeavors. There is this effort by eKranti, Government of India's eKranti effort, where the government's goal is to make government services available to public, and this should be in a kind of self-service manner. I should be able to file my income tax return, know about government benefits, know about discounts, etc., at the click of a few buttons. And all these have at the back end extremely powerful machine learning language processing models, where generative AI, and in particular quite a few of our work, are playing a very important role. I am myself coordinating 10 languages, including those from Northeast India, for machine translation as well as information extraction. We are in touch with high courts, Mumbai High Court, then Patna High Court, Bhopal High Court, who will adopt our machine translation system for transacting in a multilingual manner the judicial matters. Then MyGov and IRCC, then airlines industries have been benefiting from work of IIT Bombay in conversational AI domain. Okay, so if there are a number of examples, I do not want to mention lots of names, but we have been approached to generate movie scripts. We have given prototypes for generation of movie scripts, generating radiology reports automatically from the dictation of radiologists. This is now a commercial system. And then generating music from the music industry based on a few tag words and lots of music data, whereby a generative AI system will be trained on this data. And given things like a rainy day and a beautiful flower in the garden, it should produce a song which captures that theme. So those kind of activities are going with full intensity in the AI/ML group by IIT Bombay, which is about 10, 12 faculty members investigating them deeply.
Okay, thank you. I hope Bahubali 3.0 will come through generative AI. We have to find a producer, but ultimately the script can be prepared from generative AI. So, Dr. Nesh, you mentioned as a snippet, right? Generative AI can create a lot of hallucination, biases. But what are the measures we need to take from the product perspective before shipping it?
Thanks, Raveen. A great question. So even to begin with, if you define what is hallucination, right? For humans, hallucinations are usually sensations we perceive as real, yet non-existent. The same idea applies to AI models. The hallucinated text seems true despite being false. So a true example would be if you ask the conversational bot a question on who named the first person that landed on Mars. It comes back with an answer called Neil Armstrong. Obviously, it has done some inference and has predicted it. So this is an example of a hallucination. So when you look at even going towards a product of answering that question, how do you solve it? We need to understand what is the sources of hallucination, especially in large models, right? It either could be coming from input data or source knowledge, as an example, or it could be coming from training or the parameter knowledge that has been given at the time of its construction. So once you know the source, now the question really becomes is how do you really improve hallucination? There are many ways to do it. For example, you could really look at an application and you could make it discourage guessing. What that means is you can tell the application through certain metrics that you put in place is if you don't know the answer, don't guess, right? Just truthfully say I don't know. It needs to kind of learn to that model of enablement. You can also look at how can you set the data set to be clean to begin with. And there are a lot of metrics which are either homegrown or available in open source where it can actually rank your data set from a hallucination standpoint. Is it high, is it low kind of thing. There are also a lot of elements that has been presented from the OpenAI team called retrieval augmentation, wherein you can have the opportunity to use the external data set to be able to make that prediction. And why is this important is, remember, when these large models are actually trained, the physical source data is very static in nature. So it means, it may not be updated and be regular as needs to be. If the model, for example, has been trained on 2020 kind of elements, your answers are very limited to 2020, nothing beyond it. So it's important that, you kind of make the data set as clean as possible and as dynamic as possible. So retrieval augmentation makes a big difference. The other element is what people call as temperature scaling, wherein you want to make sure your physical application completely removes randomness, and there's ways how you can set it up depending on how you want the information to be precise or you want it to be abstract. So there are elements to really improve on hallucination. Now, when it comes to from a product standpoint, this is I would say to a large extent, it's not a solved problem yet. So I want to make that very clear is this is an area of active research. A lot of folks are looking at it. Even when you had, commercial big language models like a GPT going from 3.5 to 4, transitioning from, let's say, a single model to a mixture of experts kind of model. A lot of hand-holding was done to clean things up, right? And the most important asset here would be the way to really eliminate it is look at your data set. Try to keep it as clean as possible. Here, elements of MLOps make a big difference, especially in terms of filtering, annotation, cleanup, vector databases being set up, and how to really look at the prompt-based information. So that's what, from a product standpoint, usually, that's how it's getting set up. And then we kind of launch into production. So I expect this is going to be a learning curve. As we start putting a lot of consumer-based applications that's being set up, you learn. Right now, it's like you first learn to crawl, walk, and then run. So right now we are in the, I would say, for good or bad reason, the crawl phase. So we're falling a couple of times till you understand what not to do, and then kind of improve on its metrics and go from there. The good thing is, most of the inference applications of generative AI is running on the cloud, not on the edge. So which means you have an opportunity to always make changes to make or eliminate hallucinations. As you start transitioning to the edge, the amount of updates that you could actually do on edge-based form factors is going to be challenging because you have to do over-the-air upgrades. That's where I think things could get a little tricky. But again, next 6 months is going to be wild for all of us, especially in the product space, and see how we can actually remove hallucination.
Thank you, Dr. Vinesh. I think you nicely summarized. First, attack the source of that hallucination, which comes with training data. Second thing is about retrieval augmentation, where you provide the facts so that the model can retrieve it. That's the interim step. And the final, of course, it's a learning curve, and we can even think about UX-wise how we can provide some interaction at a boundary, communicate back from the device to the user, then learn over the time and correct it. This can be the third. Thank you, Dr. Vinesh. Moving on from the code aspect, right, to the Kamal. AI-generated code create lot of security flaws and IP issues. We know that. However, it brings in a lot of productivity. Right? What is the right balance between developer doing coding from scratch versus adopting the generative AI code? Do you think software jobs are at risk? What's your take?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. So I'll start with the security flaws and the IP issues that you pointed out, right? So typically, the code that is generated is mostly composed by the large language model for the given prompt, because your prompt is, it doesn't just contain a description, let's say in case of code completion, correct? So it also carries the context of the request as part of the payload, right? So the generated response is for the prompt which contains a context, and so the generated response is typically composed by the large language model, and it is not a verbatim of its training data. That's point one. But having said that, we've seen copyright clauses, the popular copyright clauses against lawsuits against these large language models, which means there are situations where model memorized its training data, and so it was giving verbatim of the training data, which it is not supposed to do. Now, how to address these concerns, right? Now, let's move on to the pre-GPTA, pre-generative AI era. Even in the past, we used to go to a search engine to look for a code, and search engine will lead us to a Stack Overflow or a GitHub, and we probably refer a code snippet there, and the onus of contextualizing that code, validating the license, and then adopting it for our task was with the developer. So even today, the augmenting generative AI tools for the coding tasks, regardless of whether it is code completion or code generation, translation, documentation, or validation, the onus of validating that code and accepting it is still with the developer. So that's why these tools are still called human in the loop systems, where the onus is still with the developer before validating that code. And so this also means that these tools can just augment the coding tasks. They are not there where they can automate the coding tasks. These tools are at a point where they're powerful. They're powerful. They work as an AI pair programmer. And so the more efficient the developer is, and the more efficient he or she can use these tools to generate more relevant responses. So these tools will empower the developers, not eliminate. And at this point, because they can only augment the tasks and they cannot automate. Having said that, since we are talking about security flaws and IP issues, I want to touch upon another point related to that, which is the copyright. We also have to understand that while the copyright for a human authored code, that is very mature. For that matter, it's not just code, a human authored artifact, whether it is painting, story, right? So the copyright for a human authored content has matured. Now, the copyrights for machine authored code, even if you refer or you directly copy the code, the copyrights for machine authored the code is also evolving as we speak, right? Thanks.
Thank you, Kamal. I think you nicely put, it's the responsibility of the developer, right? And most importantly, what I feel is the current generative AI can write a snippet of code. However, the humans especially can do a lot of innovation and design, especially on the system design. The current generative AI cannot mimic, but the logics can be borrowed, which are low-hanging fruits. Done from Google Stack Overflow somewhere, and right now it is getting done from the generative. I agree with your view. And also recently I traveled to Delhi, and it was a talk for Solve for Tomorrow. So there was an event conducted by Samsung. We selected top that it was a similar question, whether we lose jobs, etc. So I told them like this, like previously when you go to interview, right? If there are 3 candidates and one job is there, so you are competing only with the 3. Now there is one more hidden person, which is AI. So your creativity should be on top of the AI, or you are complementing the AI, right? Creativity. Right. So that's the view I was sharing. I just want to remind it back here.
Yeah.
Now, Moving to next person, Dr. Ibrahim. Unfortunately, he couldn't travel or join us because he was traveled to Japan. So we have pre-recorded his video. So the main question we asked him to share insights is, as you know, data is key for any AI. So what are the efforts going on data from tools and library perspective? And how do we invite more people to benefit and contribute for Gen AI Open Source? I mean, in the introduction, was told that he is leading the Linux Foundation for AI and data. So let's hear his views. David, please. So we have a hiccup. Maybe next time we use generative AI to respond that. So I'll move on. So the next one, I want to invite Tarun. The current LLMs, right, which takes a huge amount of infra for training the foundation models, right? And even if you want to host it, right, and, provide experience to the end users, again it's a inference cost. So what are your thoughts on optimization of the techniques and how small companies can leverage this for starting this for using this generative AI? Any open source tools available? Can you share your insights?
So current trend in LLMs is to take a large data set and then train a large model. And reducing complexity is an active area of research. We have seen like recently NeurIPS has hosted a challenge called LLM Efficiency Challenge, where the task is to train one LLM in one GPU and in one day. So training foundation model is very costly. Recently, we have seen a model called Falcon 40 billion parameter model, which was trained on 384 A100 NVIDIA GPU for around 2 months. And for small startups, this kind of infrastructure is infeasible. So instead of training a foundation model, they can use an open source pre-trained model and then tune it to their specific task. So Transformers by Hugging Face is a very good place to where we can find models and their parameters and their learned weights, retained models. So just yesterday, Meta has also released like Llama version 2. Uh, they are all in open source, so we can find it in Transformers Hugging Face also. So although fine tuning itself is an expensive, which depend on the number of parameters in LLM, there have been some improvements in this domain. So there is a technique of knowledge distillation where we distill a large model and then fine tune and then take that smaller distilled model and then fine tune it to the specific task. Another method is called low rank adaptation method. It's commonly known as LoRa, where we reduce the model size and computational requirements by approximating large weight matrices using low rank. Another way is to use quantize 8-bit or 4-bit training. So for fine tuning, PEFT library from Hugging Face is a very good option, and it provides parameter efficient fine tuning interface. And which include methods like LoRa and QLoRa, etc. Another library that I use is Bits and Bytes for loading and training quantized models. So, in my opinion, currently, instead of for small startups, instead of training their own foundation model, they should try to extract good quality of data and then use these open source tools and these open source pretend models and fine tune them instead of training their own foundation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tarun. Now, let's see that the question I shooted to Dr.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Ibrahim Haddad, and I am very pleased to be invited to give you a few minutes update on the LFAI and data and the PyTorch Foundation. Thank you for Samsung and the open source group at Samsung for the invitation, and I hope you had a great event so far. With respect to my updates, I will give you two updates. The first one, I will focus on LFAI and data. And as you can see, I'm actually in a hotel room. I just arrived to Japan for a tour with our members here. So we've been growing quite a bit. We started with 9 members in LFAI and data. Today we're at almost 60 member organization that are contributing and hosting project with the foundation. Similarly, starting with one project in about 4.5 years ago, today we are celebrating the hosting of 50 projects within LFAI and data, covering all the various subcategories of the large umbrella of AI and data. We're happy to share that our development community has reached over 60,000 active developers. That's really a great number when you think of it, 67,000 developers that are active across all 50 projects. And what's really interesting is that these 67,000 developers are coming from over 600 organizations that are participating in these projects on a daily basis. So we've seen this momentum for the past few years where we're adding one new project every month to the foundation, we're adding new members, we're growing our developer community, but also in addition to that, we have been expanding our scope. For the past couple of years, we've been putting additional emphasis on data, and about 30% of our projects are data-related projects. So you can see that today, data is extremely important, and we need a lot of different tools to manage data, data workflows, pipelines, sorting the data, annotating it, tagging it, anonymizing it, all the various steps that data has to go through for it to be ready for training within a model. So we've been focusing a lot of efforts on the data aspect, and we are in the process of announcing a great initiative focused on open source, generative AI, and large language model. So I would certainly invite you as organizations to join LFAI and data and be part of defining that effort, participating in it, and driving your tools and libraries and frameworks within the large umbrella to contribute to the growing ecosystem of AI. In parallel to that, I'm going to talk a couple minutes on the PyTorch Foundation. As you know, the PyTorch project transitioned to the Linux Foundation from Meta towards the end of last year. We've announced it in September of 2022. And since then, we have achieved several milestones. We have transitioned the project assets to the foundation. We opened up the foundation for additional members. As you may recall, we only opened the foundation or announced it with the 6 founding members. As recently as a week ago, major companies have joined us. I'm unable to announce the names, but we will be announcing them in the next couple of weeks. Join us at the board level, and we've had really an astonishing number of academic institution, R&D labs joining us as well as the associate member. So all of these different milestones will be announced in the next 2 to 3 weeks. In parallel to that, we have also hired dedicated staff for the PyTorch Foundation in the areas of marketing and communication and technical program management. And we defined our program for the year and we're executing on it. So we are going ahead full steam with the PyTorch Foundation. And in parallel to the activities in the foundation itself, we have massive increase in contributions to the project. We've had or experienced over 30% increase in the number of commits after the project has moved to the foundation, just showcasing the importance of hosting project under neutral organization. So on the PyTorch side, I would like to invite you to attend our event, the major event, the PyTorch conference that we will be hosting in the Bay Area in San Francisco on October 16 and 17. We are preparing an amazing lineup of speaker demos. We have a poster session, a reception, and multiple events happening and activities during these 2 days. So please take this as an invitation. You can still register for the event. And if you're an organization and you're interested in sponsoring this event, please feel free to reach us via the contacts we have on the website. So as a previous Samsunger, I would like to wish you a great event. I had a great 6 years at Samsung research focusing on open source. And I hope you guys are having a great time in contributing to open source and growing the internal activities within Samsung. So thank you very much. If you'd like to learn more, please feel to reach out to me at my email, my first name, Ibrahim, @linuxfoundation.org. Thank you very much and have a great event.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim, for sharing your insights on AI and data. Now, moving on, Dr. Pushpak, traditionally, if you have that embedded and cloud architectures, you want to push some product where the input is fixed and the output is fixed. So the testing, the QA is very easy. From there, we move to traditional AI, where the input and the output is again slightly constant. Now with generative AI, the input is also changing and the output also changing. How do you evaluate that this solution is good or bad or is moderate? What are the open source tools available so that the industry can use it? Pushpak, you are on mute.
Sorry, the question was for me, Praveen?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was a bit of sound problem. Could you just repeat the question briefly?
Yeah, so how do we benchmark generative AI output quality as it keeps varying for each prompt? So is there any standard outsourced tools available for domains? That's essence of the question.
Okay. So, you know, as has come out many times during the discussion, I think Vinesh also mentioned this, that we are in the crawling stage. So it may be premature to, you know, ask benchmarking of generative AI. I think it should take a shape, but there are, you know, pointers and helping factors to address this question. So, you know, first and foremost, we must keep going back to the fundamentals always. As I said that, you know, the basic thing which a foundation model does very well is predicting the next word based on 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 previous words. It can also make use of course, masking, and that will be like filling the blank. Now, one thing I must make clear is that there are two important points we must never lose sight of. One is that all this is probabilistic. So therefore, however much we try, it is impossible to get a generative AI system which will not have bias, which will not have hallucination. It is impossible. Okay, so there is no theoretical proof, but I'm sure experimentally this will come out again and again, just like it, you know, physics established the laws of conservation of energy, second law of thermodynamics, and so on. Now, since the framework is probabilistic, we are totally dependent on data. And as you also rightly sort of hinted, that generative AI became possible because of open sourceness. if everybody kept their data concealed, protected, hidden, then where would be the training data? Okay, how will you get a language model after all? Or forget about large language model. So data in whatever shape, in whatever quality is available, and that is used to train a system. So unless the data is completely pure, completely clean, we will have problems of hallucination and bias. And even there, because the whole framework is probabilistic, at every point you have the highest probability element picked up and output. These situations will be coexistent with generative AI. So, and the other part of the story is that here is a system which produces responses without experiencing it. Okay, let's reflect on this point. Okay, if you're asked to produce a poem on the miseries of life, okay, to ChatGPT, it produces a beautiful poem. If you ask it to produce a poem on the beauty of moon, it does it, but it doesn't experience. Okay, so the experience and action are delinked, which is philosophically, ethically, okay, a very, very fundamental point to ponder on. Because the system does not have attraction, repulsion, because the system does not have pain and pleasure, this is a very, very peculiar situation. Okay, God has given us a generative capability. When I talk, my body gets affected, and maybe I get a slap from somebody, or I get an appreciation from somebody. It comes as a feedback. So the pleasure and pain, attraction and repulsion, which Bhagavad Gita calls Sankalpa and Vikalp, is not there in generative AI. To think about this fundamental question, and therefore we have to look at it in a completely different light. Coming to the question of benchmarking, it will be always a question of how good a next word predictor or fill in the blank system the model is. That is the first benchmark question. Second benchmark question is, how does the system perform on downstream tasks? Okay, I'll give question answering, I'll give summarization, I'll give translation, and various multimodal activities like captioning an image, generating a video, and so on. And the benchmarking will be done against the performance of those applications, and where we have standard metrics like blue score, precision, recall, F-score, and so on. So there are already tools which automatically produce these metrics. All machine translation systems have modules which automatically compute blue score, CH, F-score, and so on. So in summary, the benchmarking of generative AI will be in three ways. One is how responsible it is. What is its degree of hallucination, bias, offensive text, handling, and so on. Second is its performance in downstream applications. Third is its predictability with respect to masking and next word. And finally, which is a much, much deeper question, how can it experience its own output? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pushpa. It was very insightful, starting from your analogy to the measurement criteria itself will evolve, and you listed almost 5-6 parameters, which can be a good points to look into it and design a framework around that. Yeah, so moving on, Dr. Vinesh, we also used one analogy about adding a friend. I will take from there. Right, so what do you think about this watermarking? Right? What's your take on informing other users when the content is created by generative AI? Right? Any open source contributions are happening in that area for watermarked generative AI concepts?
Yeah, great question. I think this is one of the million-dollar questions is the content being generated, either be photo, video, music, or even linguistics. is it copyright protected? And how do you put some kind of authentication on top of it to make sure you're not pilfering from someone else's work, right? So it's a great question. Unfortunately, I think it's still early stages of how you get it done, but there are a few, I would say, open source communities are actually working on it. For good or bad reason, the photo and video kind of became an anchor point, or I should say, visual solutions from an authentication standpoint. So there's a group called Content Authentication Initiative. It is a group that has been set up to look and fight for misinformation and adding a layer of verifiable trust around most of the digital content that was kind of created. It's a open source cross-industry collaboration group and also has providability of interoperability of tools. This, to a large extent, was kind of initiated through large enterprise corporations like Adobe, Microsoft kind of stuff. And it was released in 2022 by a Coalition for Content Provenance and Authentication group called C2PA. So as part of this group, what they basically do is it's a 3 or 4 step process wherein they actually have metadata that's actually been created into these content. And then when you use it either for training or when the content actually gets generated as a function of the metadata that's being used, you can actually go and verify the source of creation. Now, is it going to be bulletproof completely? Not quite sure, right? So this is something where you really need heavy open source contributions, wherein large enterprise companies, especially in the content creation and content consumption space, could jump in, pipe in, and then kind of draft a spec. And once you have that spec defined, you want to put a certain amount of information into the physical source model itself. So when the data set is actually used for training, that level of metadata information gets published in your output format. So that's the goal, that's the vision. And I think it's a lot of study phase as we speak. Then the next question becomes this is mostly anchored on vision and I would say video kind of use cases. Can I expand this into textual or music or other kind of data modalities? So that's still work ongoing. Is it well-established open source community that does it? To my knowledge, no. It's still in early phases. So I think in summary, I would say strong initiative, well recognized by the industry, strong push for it. In fact, has accelerated in the last 6 months, given a lot of lawsuits that have come out, even against well-established players like Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, OpenAI, because a lot of artists, a lot of consumers have quoted that either information is very close to what they've created before or exactly identical kind of stuff. So I think things are going to change very soon, very fast. But is it a well-established community out there? I would say at this point of time, no. But hopefully things change next 6 months.
Thank you, Dr. Vinesh. I think hearing all the views from distinguished panelists, I can conclude that still evolving sites, which is really, really moving fast. And there are some unanswered problems, which means that there is a huge opportunity for research. And once the research gets solved, can contribute back to open source. So with that, I thank all the panelists and all the audience, and thank you. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thank you to all the panelists and Praveen for a lively and engrossing panel discussion. Thank you. We have many learnings from the discussion today. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Balwinder, Senior Director, Head of Advanced Research Group, and our Open Innovation Team, on stage to conclude Day 1 of SOSCON India 2023.
Very good morning or afternoon to all. because we have speakers and attendees from multiple parts of the world. I would acknowledge all of them and their time zones. Some are working out of their time zones to make themselves available to big thanks to all of them. On behalf of Samsung and Samsung R&D Bangalore, I would extend my heartfelt thanks to all the speakers, the organizers, all of our partners, and also the attendees who made SOSCON India 2023, I would say, a resounding success. I wish to extend my sincere thanks to our MD Dipesha and CTO Mohan Rao for envisioning an open source growth story for Samsung, and also continuous encouragement in making SOSCON India possible. Also to our esteemed speakers throughout the day, your expertise and dedication has really enriched our understanding of the topic, like generative AI, matter, digital wallet, and blockchain. Your passion and commitment has left an indelible mark on all of us. I would also like to express sincerest gratitude to the organizing committee for their meticulous planning and unwavering commitment to excellence. To our supporting partners, the Linux Foundation, London Stock Exchange Group, and the IEEE ComSoft Bangalore chapter, our media partners, Open Source for You, and Electronics for You. Thank you all for your generosity and belief in our vision. Your support has been truly instrumental in making SOSCON India a reality. To all the attendees, your active participation and engagement has made this event truly memorable. Let us carry forward the gained knowledge and the connections made today, continue to innovate and collaborate for a better future. Thank you all for being a part of SOSCON India 2020.
A big thanks to all the audience, online audience that stayed with us. Thank you.